What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hockey Royalty Live. This is your boy Russell Morgan here. I'm here with Joe Paterino. Our host, Randy McMahon, isn't here today. We have a bevy of topics to get to. We actually have some hockey starting next week, which is kind of exciting. But first, just want to take a few moments to touch on the devastating loss of Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew last Thursday. I think once a lot of the news and I guess rumors started popping up on that late Thursday night, it was just like you're kind of just hoping and wishing like none of it's true, right? I mean, it was so late at night and you never really saw like a real, I guess, credible source come out and say anything that had happened. And so everybody just kind of was going to bed, just hoping to wake up and not hear about the worst. And sure enough, you wake up the next morning and you just hear what had happened, and you see the statement from Columbus, and it's just devastating. So I mean, it's just Joe and I were just talking here, and I have Joe here with me, and we were just kind of talking right before we started here about how it's like you're just kind of get at a loss of words with everything that happened, and you don't really know like even how to process it. And it's like, Joe, you were just describing it to me. It's like this hockey, it's such a big sport internationally, right? It's one of the four major sports in the world, but or in the country at least. But you kind of feel this like sense of like Joe told me, it's like this sense of community where everybody feels so close knit to everything that happened, or everything that happens around the sport. And you just like you don't know these people or whatnot, but you just still feel like this connection with this player. Like, I mean, if you're just like such a huge hockey fan, you know who Johnny Gaudreau is. It's Johnny Hockey. It's like you've been watching this guy, especially as a Kings fan. You've been watching him play Calgary. You've seen him score goals against the Kings or whatnot, or just happen to be watching Columbus Blue Jackets game and you see him and all the great things he's been able to do on the ice. And then you hear the story. It's just heartbreaking, man. I mean, it was a total gut punch when I woke up the next morning, and yeah, it was just devastating.
Yeah. It's been really hard to kind of like think about and string together a coherent kind of what to say. Certainly stuff that already hasn't been said, I mean, the outpouring of support, like you said, you woke up that next morning, or went to bed that night just saying, just please God, don't be true. And woke up and just checking and just waiting for anything, just something to say that it wasn't. And then, like you, the first thing I saw was the Columbus statement, and it was a gut punch. Like, it takes your breath away. And I don't know how to explain that, because we don't know him or the family, and we can certainly recognize a tragedy, but the way it hits is it hit harder than maybe you would think, or you would imagine. And for me, like, you just talked about, I mean, I've been involved in the sport of hockey since I was 3 years old. So I don't know if it's that, it just feels like a smaller community. And it brought me back to when I remember where I was with the locomotive plane crash. I remember the Humboldt Broncos bus crash and these awful, awful events. But like, the way just everybody genuinely comes together, and you see people putting sticks out, and you see what's going on in Calgary and in Ohio and in other sports across the country. You've seen baseball stadiums do moments of silence, and what the Columbus Crew did. I mean, it's so hard to put into words, and you can't help but feel just gutted for the family and the people that are actually close to them. And I mean, I'll go as time is, going on here, and not to say you don't think about it, but it's not fresh in your mind. And all of a sudden you'll scroll and you'll see, there's an article, or there's a clip of a moment of silence. And it's just like, man, I just cannot believe that this is true. I mean, two guys just in the prime of their lives with young families to be, and it's just utterly devastating. And you know, Johnny Gaudreau, like forget obviously incredibly talented, all that stuff, but I don't know that you could think of a player that if you watch him play, you can just see how much fun he was having playing the game of hockey. Like he played, it seemed as if he played every single game as if it was pond hockey. He just had an absolute blast, and the joy, the smile. It sucks. It sucks that we won't see that again.
Yeah, I mean, you just pray and think about the families and everything they're going through. I mean, but yeah, like you said, the hockey community, it's been so comforting to see. I mean, the tributes out in Calgary. It's just, I mean, you think about how that relationship ended with the Flames. I mean, it was almost kind of a little contentious there with him leaving free agency, but then you see the amount of Gaudreau jerseys and the all the flowers and everything that's being left. It's at the arena. It's just, man, like, so hockey fans are different, man. Like we get so attached to these players and these teams. It becomes something more than like you just feel like these players even just as a fan by watching them, and like it's like they're part of your lives. It's like I feel like I've known Johnny Gaudreau for my whole forever. Like I feel like just been by watching him play, and he's been just like such a huge impact on like all hockey fans' lives watching him play, because he was such an incredible player. And it's just been so it was so devastating. It's just a gut punch, and you feel for the families, and it's just shitty. It really is. I mean, there's no really else way to put it. I mean, killed by a drunk driver. It's just an awful, awful, awful situation. And just don't drink and drive. Just don't. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. I don't. Yeah. So our hearts go out to Matthew and Johnny Gaudreau and the families and the Columbus Blue Jackets and Calgary Flames, and I guess all the hockey community. So there'll never be another Johnny Hockey. I'll know that. So I hope they retire at 13. Oh, sucks, but we'll try our best to get back into hockey here. So, all right. So we got rookie face-off rosters announced, Joe. Rookie face-off. We have some actual hockey to talk about here starting next week. Man.
It always sneaks up on us.
It feels like this summer's kind of flown by, right? It's just, I don't know. It feels like the game 7 of the Oilers and Panthers was just yesterday, and now all of a sudden we have hockey in 8 days. It's I'm looking forward to it. How about you?
Yes, like you said, it sneaks up on you, or at least it does to me every single year. So, and it helps to kind of like get me back into hockey mode. We get to the fall, the temperature's cooling off here, so it's starting to get to feel that way in the air. And I know most people jump right to football, but for me, I immediately go to hockey. So it's nice to have this this rookie face-off coming. I don't, it's a nice way to get not reintroduced, but excited again about some of these young guys. And some of these guys have been prospects for a little bit now. Some of them, new draftees. So it's a lot of fun to get a little taste of Kings prospect action. And with that probably comes maybe a little bit of overreaction to what someone does or doesn't do, frankly. So, but either way,
from Kings fans, come on now, that's not a thing. But
it's good to have hockey.
The rookie face-off, it's turned into like a nice little prelude to the season. I love it, man. I get so. I think you start yearning for hockey after it's been gone for so long. You're just so happy to see anybody play in your favorite team's uniform or just the Kings uniform, and so I will say, and it's a little disappointing the way this has kind of gone down in LA. I've gone to the last 3, and the first one 3 years ago was in Arizona. They had the Coyotes games at Gila River Arena, where fans could come out and see their team play. 2 years ago at TechCU Arena, which is the new San Jose Barracudas arena, they opened that arena with a rookie faceoff game, and where all the teams I think played there. And then last year was in Vegas / Henderson, where the Henderson Silver Knights played. They had the Vegas games there. And this year, I'm a little disappointed the Kings weren't able to find a bigger venue for where they're playing. All the games are going to be in El Segundo, where the Kings practice at the Toyota Sports Performance Center. Tickets are the cost of the tickets have been widely circulated about how expensive they are because of the limited amount of seating that's at that venue. I will say I heard that the team did try to look into going to crypto and also Toyota Arena. Both venues were busy already, and this was something that the Kings couldn't put off, I guess, another year. They had already put off. They were supposed to host last year, and they had to put that off because the whole Australia thing. So they had to host this year. They weren't able to find another venue, and just unfortunately they had to stick with Toyota Sports Performance Center. It's a little disappointing because you just love seeing fans get so excited for these games, even though they don't really mean anything. But man, like, I mean, I go to these cities and you see like fans from all over, like Ducks fans, Sharks fans, Avalanche fans, just come over from all over just to go watch these games, and it's just a little disheartening to see. But hey, I'm glad that the teams are able to figure out a way to telecast and get these broadcasted on the website. So there's a little bit of I guess there's a little bit of enjoyment. So if you're not able to actually go to the games, you can still watch them and get your hockey fill in. But we did get the rosters in for the Kings, and I don't know if there's really any surprises here. You got the big names, I guess, is Cohen Zimmer, Jakub Dvorak, the second round pick a couple years ago, and then you have Brant Clark, who's also included on this roster. And I think a lot of Kings fans were a little surprised to see his name included on this team, while they're suspecting that he's supposed to be a shoo-in for the big league, the big club, coming up to training camp, and then they see his name on this roster, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, okay, what's going on here? I don't think there's too much of concern here. I just think that's maybe a little bit of confidence booster. I could see it like that. But how do you see this playing out?
I don't know. I'm not too. I wasn't too surprised by it. I don't put a whole lot of stock in it meaning anything to his whether or not he makes the roster. But we've kind of talked about on this show that we all expect Brant Clark to make the roster, but in the next breath, we've kind of all expressed, but we wouldn't be surprised, right, if he didn't, given the way this organization has kind of operated. So I'm not concerned about it. I'm not, I think it's perfectly fine. He's still incredibly young. I think it's important to remember that. So, am I don't know if I'm forgetting if this was the same tournament, but I believe didn't Dursey play in this? And I don't know if even then he was a little bit older, if that's accurate. And he ended up being a regular, I think, in LA that pretty much that season. I could be confusing my years or my tournaments, but
I think that was in Arizona. Yeah. I'd have to go back and look at that roster, but I like just thinking on top of my head that roster that the Kings had. I mean, just thinking about the players that were on that team. Brant Clark was supposed to be on that team. I believe that was the year he got mono and he wasn't able to go. But that roster included Dursey, Jordan Spence, Alex Turcotte, Quentin Byfield, Arthur Kaliev.
Yeah.
I think Samuel Fagima was on that team too.
The heyday of LA prospect.
When we were living the high life of the future of the LA Kings. But yeah. So Dursey was on that team. I know he wasn't supposed to, or he didn't make the team out of camp or to start the year, and then Doughty got hurt, and that's he got him. But I mean, you see expected players that are, or players that are expected to be regulars on the Kings still kind of make their way on these rosters somehow. I think Quentin Byfield, wasn't he on the team? I don't want to say last year or the year before that in San Jose, I believe he was. And then he ended up I don't know if it was start of year, but anyway, like I'm not concerned.
I'm not concerned.
Yeah.
No, no, I think it is. I mean, again, nobody should be surprised if Kyle Burrows is RD3 to start the season. No, nobody.
You've almost kind of, it seems like you've almost kind of accepted it now.
I
Like I
think
can hear it in your voice.
I think I think the signing, and I don't. We keep going back to this. This is your fault. The signing of Joel Edmondson, I think, really like put me in a totally different place with this organization and with how they want to play hockey. To where, yeah, like I have. Thank you. Sai puts it in the five stages of grief. I think that's spot on. Like whatever that is. You told me the one time I was still in whatever phase I was, Russ.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
I think I was only in the second stage, but like, yeah, I don't even know if I'll be angry if it happens because I'm almost expecting it. You just so. But that said, this roster, him being on this roster, does not do that for me. I don't know if it doesn't sound like it did for you either.
No, yeah, I'm glad he's on this roster. To be honest with you, I feel like this could be not necessarily that a player like or a person like Brandt Clarke needs it, but I think it could be like a confidence booster for him going into the main camp where he's expected to make a push at least for a roster spot with the Kings. I mean, this will only be his second one that he's taken part of. He wasn't on the one last year, I believe, because he was supposed to go to Australia or he didn't or whatever. And then the one I said in Arizona, he got mono. But the one in San Jose, I mean, I still remember him doing the walk-off shootout winner where he scored. I don't know if you remember, he scored that shootout goal and then he went out and opened the door and walked off. And they were like, "Wait, the game's not over yet," and he had to come walk back in. So it's like I'm happy to see Brandt Clarke on this roster because I mean, you talk about like we just mentioned how the Kings prospect pool was like so like exalted to be this next big thing for the Kings, and it's like now we only have these few little diamonds that we have to look forward to. And one diamond looks pretty good in Quentin Byfield. I'm pretty excited about. And this other one in Brandt Clarke still needs a little bit more polish, but I feel like it's looking pretty good for this player. I mean, everything that we've seen, just even the few hints that we got from last year during the regular season, this looks like a sure bet to be, or Clarke looks like a sure bet to be not only a star in the NHL, but maybe even just like a generational player for the Kings. I could be over speaking my bounds here, but you get so excited to see a player like Brandt Clarke play. Maybe it's because we haven't really seen a player like Brandt Clarke. And I say that all the time. We haven't seen a player like Brandt Clarke play on the Kings. I mean, it's a player that thinks pure offense from the back end, which something desperately we've said multiple times on this podcast, the Kings desperately need. So I'm excited to see it. And I'm excited to see him play with another player in Cohen Zemer. Like, Zemer, he kind of gives off that same kind of confidence that Clarke exudes. So I don't believe they've ever actually played a game together. I don't think they have. Like I know Zemer was on the roster last year in Vegas, and I know Clarke wasn't there. So this will be the first time we get to see Clarke and Zemer play together against other teams. So I'm excited to see how those two kind of mesh. And there's also other big names, and Liam Greentree, the first round draft pick. Carter George is expected to be there too. The second round draft pick, the goalie, excuse me. And then you have Eric Portillo is also going to be there. I've had some people ask me is like, why no Jared Wright or no who's the other draft pick that the Kings had, the collegiate player. But pretty much any of the players that go to college, they don't normally participate in these tournaments. So if you don't see those names, don't be alarmed or anything. They're expected to get their seasons going with their collegiate clubs before so they don't have time to head into this. But are there any other names that you kind of see on this roster that you're maybe excited about?
I mean, obviously, there's the obvious, like some of the ones you just mentioned. I'm interested to see what type of step Francesco Pinelli takes this year.
Yeah.
I think, he's somebody that a lot of Kings fans were really, really excited about heading into last season, especially. So I think it'll be interesting to see what he does, not only in this weekend, but as we kind of go forward throughout the year. A player that has always impressed me in these face-offs has been Matthew Jamson. Like, I think he continues to look good every time he comes over here and plays. I don't know. I think there's a player in him. I don't know at what that means. Like, I don't know that there's a sneaky middle six guy, or if he's just going to be a bottom six, but or, if he even makes the NHL. But I don't know. Just he always seems to impress me when he plays in these, and be interested to see if he can carve out a role for himself.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him because, yeah, I mean, every time you kind of like falls to the wayside. He's like 7th-round pick, and you're always looking at you're always focused on the high end draft picks that are taken by the Kings, but it's always Jamson that's always involved, or always scoring, or always involved in a play or whatever, scoring chance. And it's like, oh, he just kind of reminds you, like, hey, I'm still here. Like, I'm still a pretty solid draft prospect for the Kings. And so I'm excited, too, to see how he plays. I think he was 170 last year in terms of weight. I think he's up to 175 now. So we're getting some muscle built on there. He's 6'2", so he's got some length to him, too. So if he's able to put it all together, I know there's not a lot of expectations for 7th-round draft picks, but I mean, hey, Matt Roy was able to make a name for himself and carve out a career as a 7th-rounder. So, hey, you never know. Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No, I was just going to say, on like looking at the back end too, I've two similar guys where Cole Krieger and Angus Booth, again, guys that I don't know, they always seem to look okay whenever I've seen them. I don't know that means they're going to make the NHL or have an impact in the NHL, but if you can have guys that you can at least call upon, like the Kings have clearly seen value in Jacob Moverarium being in the organization because they keep him around. I think we've talked about how why not just play him in the NHL? But either way, they see value in a player that has been in the AHL, and they know that, okay, well, if we run into injuries or whatnot, we can call on these guys. So I think, perhaps some of these defensemen can carve themselves a role like that. And I think a lot of people are probably going to start to, he's still very young, so I'm not necessarily one of those, but I was down on the Jacob Dvorak pick to begin with. But I think it's another year just to see how is he looking growth-wise, development-wise, skating-wise, all those things, and to see what type of player that he's going to go. I mean, this was a project I think we all, he was young and he was coming off some injury.
Playing in like a small Czech league, right? I mean, I would say small, but like...
Yeah, pretty raw player. And, it doesn't seem like the upside is all that significant. But again, of a player with his size and he's picked in the 2nd round, though. So the Kings saw something in him. So we'll see, what type of weekend he has in this too. But I think, like I mentioned and kind of joked earlier about the reaction, like, there'll be a lot of who knows. I may fall prey.
Yeah, I'm right with you, man. Like Dvorak, especially. Like last year, I try not to walk away from these things like with such an impact on how I think about these players and going into the season. But I mean, I have to say, like last year, like Dvorak, I'm with you, man. Like I didn't really see much to be like, oh wow, like okay, I see what they saw out of Dvorak to make him a 2nd-round pick. So like. It's same thing with Dev Camp. Like you watch these scrimmages and you're like, oh man, like just you're so like caught up in just watching any sense of hockey that's on in front of you, and then you just have to nitpick and microscope everything that happens. And that's kind of what I was doing with Dvorak. I'll be the first one to say I was, but I still want to see more from the player, right? Like it's just like you with how like the arguments in terms of like his skating. There's some scouts that say he's not that great of a skater, and the Kings scouts say, oh, they think he's a great skater. And I mean, I watch him play, and I was like, man, I kind of see a little bit of the concerns of his skating ability because of not necessarily just because of his size, but it's just I see it. I see those concerns on the ice when I watch him play. So I'm hoping to see a little bit more out of Dvorak. And I mean, you got Brandt Clark there with you. Maybe those two are a pair, and you have like a big, lanky Jacob Dvorak playing alongside of Brandt Clark, who hopefully those two can kind of get some chemistry. Maybe we see those two playing together in the near future or in the future. Who knows? But there's some other names. Matthew Mania, that's another one.
Oh, yes. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I am excited to watch Matthew Mania. Not only because of his name, it's awesome, but it seems like he's got all the skills and talent to be a prototypical Joe Paterino NHL defenseman, doesn't he?
He does. He does. Very modern defenseman. But I would say listen, I haven't watched like a ton of Matthew Mania, so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. From what I've seen, like it's a different, like the way, like Brant Clark is an all offensive defenseman, but I think he's different than Jordan Spence. And I think Brant Clark is different than a Matthew Mania. Like there's differences, I think, in how they do it, because Matthew Mania seems like a really good skater, really fluid skater, gets up and down the ice real well. Where Clark, we talk about bad skating. I don't know that Clark's a bad skater, but he's an awkward skater. Like there was questions about his skating to this day, so it's not like
he wouldn't be a Kings prospect if there wasn't, right?
Right. They've had a history of this, recent history of this. Kaliev's another one. So, but Clark is much more cerebral and he's opportunistic, and you see he recognizes when to jump and takes advantage of it, where a guy like a Mania, and I would say Spence, and hopefully we see a little bit more of it from Spence this year with getting some of the shackles off him from his partner last year, that maybe he's able to kind of showcase that a little bit. I mean, we saw Dursey do it quite a bit, like that free flowing, fluid skating, like is good, and I think that's encouraged, and I think we should see more of that in Los Angeles. It's severely lacking, I would argue, and Mania, again, a bit of a project, not a big guy, 5th round pick, I believe. Mm-hmm. So it'll take some time, but again, like some of these guys, they if they can eventually just make so much of an impact because of what they can do on the ice that you just can't turn away. Now we'll see if he's somebody of that stature yet, but hard not to be excited about the talent that he has.
Yeah, the defensive group, I'm just kind of looking over it as a whole. I mean, a lot of the forwards, there's a lot of camp invites. I mean, because the Kings really haven't drafted that many players, let alone like take away how good those players can be. They just haven't drafted a lot. I think 2 years ago it was 4 picks, and last year was 4 picks again, or I could be wrong, but it just seems like there's not a ton of prospects in the cupboard right now. But I mean, you look at the defensive group, and there's like the names we just mentioned: Dvorak, Krieger, Mania, Jared Woolley, who was drafted this past year, and then you have Angus Booth and Brant Clark. And Angus Booth, we talked about a little bit already, but he's going to his first pro season in Ontario Reign, and so I'm excited to see how that kind of jump happens, because we've already seen Jordan Spence make that transition from the QM at JHL to the AHL pretty well, and he translated all that production right away and was putting up stats that were then already beaten by Brant Clark the season after that. And then there's one other name here is Parker Berg. I don't know if you looked up a little bit of him, but plays for the Regina Pats. He was a teammate of Connor Bedard's 2 years ago, and he had a pretty solid year with Regina.
38 points in 36 games.
Yep. So he's got some good offense to him. So there's some good offensive minded defensemen on this team, which seems kind of rare for a Kings sponsored team, I guess. So I'm curious to see how that all plays out. And there's another name too I was looking up is Luke Woodworth, who's an invite as a forward. He was actually the captain of the Drummondville Voltigeurs of the QMJHL, and the Drummondville Voltigeurs won the championship of the QMJHL. So he was the captain of that team last year, and they went to Memorial Cup, actually lost to Saginaw Spirit, I believe. But he had 62 points in 62 games for Drummondville last year in the Q. So I'm curious to watch him. So there's some interesting names to kind of see, I guess, in terms of camp invites. You never know. Some of these names probably not going to return for main camp, or even we'll see him in a Kings uniform again. But hey, you're just happy to see some names that have maybe been productive in some junior leagues before. And hey, who knows? Maybe they make a name for themselves in rookie faceoffs, and I guess that's what these are for. So I'm looking forward to it. Should be fun. All right, let's move on. Joe, I think it was last week or the week before.
I put out a tweet. real quick,
kind of talking about how. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to get to this because I know I
What's up?
saw OC Steve came in with a super chat. Appreciate that, OC Steve. So, Russ, this has been a conversation in King's Twitter, and I know you've been not involved, but like a part of the conversation. You've been to these rookie face-offs. OC Steve's question: are tickets still $400? Can you shed a little bit of light on this for us, please?
So OC Steve, yes, tickets are $400. And it has to do with obviously the limited capacity. I don't. It's tough. I don't like I said earlier. I'm just disappointed with how the Kings kind of set this whole thing up. There should be no reason tickets like for these games, a weekend game, should be $400. And I know they were discounted $200, I believe, for season ticket holders for the Kings, but regular tickets, and there were only 200 passes available. So I don't know. I think a better way to do it maybe have been make them cheaper, do a game by game thing, have like a lottery on it. There should be no reason you're trying to make a profit on this if you're holding it at a practice facility. You're probably not employing that many people in terms of like concession workers or ticket takers or anything like that. So to try to make a buck on it, it just seems so like what are we doing, man? I don't want to dive too much into it, but yeah, it's just, I guess that's the route they wanted to go.
Seems like a tough sell and a tough pill to swallow, but
yeah, it's tough. It is what it is.
Anyways, thanks OC Steve for the reminder.
But thanks OC Steve. I love you, buddy. He's cool. My fellow neighbor OC Steve. Okay, yeah. Let's move on to. So yeah, I think it was a week ago, maybe even longer. I put out a tweet kind of comparing the forward group of LA from last year to what we expect it to be this year. And I wanted to kind of gauge how fans, I guess, compared the two groups. Because I was thinking, like, you look at the lineup, and I guess I think it was Zach Sewell who put out the article, and everybody's kind of basing it off his conversation with Rob Blake after, I believe, free agency or some trades that went down. He put that article kind of touching on what he expects the lineup to be, and that's kind of what we've now, I guess, been talking about the last few weeks or so. You have Alex Lefebvre up top, you playing with Kopitar and Kempe. You have Deneau playing with Moore and Jeannot. You have Quentin Byfield centering his own line with Kevin Fiala and Warren Fogle. Those two have actually, Fogle and Byfield, seems like they've been training together in the offseason a little bit. So it's good to see them kind of generate a little early chemistry before the season starts. And then you have a fourth line, Alex Turcotte, Akil Thomas, Trevor Lewis. Who knows where Arthur Kaliev is going to be at this moment. Samu Fagemo. He's got a new number, which is kind of exciting. So we'll see what happens there. But so I just wanted to kind of compare that roster to what we saw a lot of with the Kings, their forward lineup last year. And I have to say, Joe, a lot of fans seem to think that this year's roster is a little bit better than last year's. And I personally kind of agree with them. What do you think?
First things first, I want to be very clear when you say roster, you are referring to the forward group.
The forward group, yes. Okay. We're just primarily talking forwards. We're not talking your dreaded defenseman that get you upset here.
Thank you. So when you made this tweet, literally the exact, I don't know, like the first thing that came into my head, and I tweeted it at you, was the music video to the Sheepdog song, I Don't Know, because that was the name of the song is I Don't Know. And the chorus just says, da, 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 I don't know. And I have no idea. I honestly, like, you could tell me and make a case that this lineup's better. Okay. I won't, like, argue it too hard. I can make a case for it to be better. I can make a case for it to be worse. I think the bull case, what people see in this, is they look at the drastic difference in third line center. Like, listen, I think Pierre Dubois is a good player. I think he's going to have a really nice season in Washington. Fact is, he didn't do what he was brought in to do in LA. So I think it's conceivable to say, okay, whether the third line center is Deneau or whether the third line center is Byfield, the Kings should get better performance out of that line
I
because
just want to point out, I think a little birdie told me that you may have drafted Pierre-Luc Dubois in a fantasy hockey league. Is that
funny
true?
story, funny sidetrack, Russ. I didn't draft him. I'm as I know people are going to love this tangent, but
Yeah,
whatever.
this is great, by the way.
We're in
This
a
fantasy league, it sounds amazing.
I am in a 20 team. This is the first year of a 20 team dynasty league. Okay. So it's the first year. Everybody's drafting from scratch. Um, I was lucky enough to draw the 20th pick. Okay. Out of 20 effing teams. So the way this league works is after the first year, it's going to split 10 and 10. It's like promotion relegation. Okay.
Okay.
So they'll split after the first year. So then if you're in the bottom league, you try to work you can win the league and win money, and then you try to work your way up. Okay. So whatever, that's the genesis of the league. So I'm into round, God, I don't know. I think I'm into round 10. And so I have the back-to-backs because I'm lucky enough to have 20. So I get the last pick
200 then, I'm guessing, right? If my math
round.
serves me right.
So whatever the math is on that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm in round 20. And so I have, round 10. And so I have like my queue set up, and I had traded down earlier in the draft. So I had a extra pick in like round 10 or something like that. So like, all right, I made my picks there at the turn, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go with Dubois in like 6-7 picks. And he gets picked. And I needed I needed another center. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Okay, I still had other guys. Like, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. But then I get to the next round. And again, I got the back-to-backs. And I look at my queue and the list of players that's there. And I'm like, I'll pick one of these and I'll trade back. So I sent out that one of my picks was available to trade back. I'll move down in the round if anybody wants to move up. So sure enough, 2 people reach out. One guy looked at, whatever, exchanging picks. And the other guy I happen to see is the guy that drafted Pierre Dubois. So I said, hey, not sure where you're at here. If you want to just swap picks, we can talk about that. But how about Pierre Dubois? Can we include him in this deal? Because kind of had him in my queue when you took him from me. He goes, I'm open to dealing Dubois. So we worked out a deal. So I ended up trading that pick in the first pick in the 11th round. I think I traded the first pick in the 13th round for Dubois and a later, like a 16th round pick or something like that. But again, you're deep in these drafts, and there is minor leaguers that are kept. So there's a lot of minor leaguers that have been sprinkled throughout this. So it's, but I'm like, I can't quit this guy. So I traded for him. The guy, he couldn't have lasted like an hour on the team he was on before I traded for him. And I don't know, like, listen, I was looking, I'm like, this guy had just career lows at like everything. And he's going to go play first line or whatever in Washington and probably have a 68-point season with, back to 220 shots on goal and I don't know, whatever, because this league has hits and 100 hits. So yes, I am back on the PL. I can't quit him. So I'm happy to be back with him.
Man, so for all you fans who have pointed out they want Joe to be the Kings GM, he once again traded for Pierre Dubois. I will say it didn't sound like the same assets of Velarde,
right,
Kupari and I follow, but
yeah, I mean, again, you're talking picks deep in these drafts. Like we're not exactly, it's not high end talent that's left, and obviously his stock has fallen quite a bit. But I comfortably see him getting back to right around the ranges where he was before LA when he gets the appropriate ice time. So we'll see. But that said, I can understand the logic of either Byfield or Deneau outperforming the production and the play that they got from Dubois last year. Totally can see that.
Yeah.
And I believe I'm a strength on the middle guy, so I can buy that. I don't know that they're any better on the wings. And I think that's been a pretty big issue for the Kings, at least high end, right? Like they've got Fogle fits in perfect with like your Moore and that type of style of player.
Feels like an Arvidsson light kind of replacement.
Yeah,
right?
like I mean, Arvidsson's a more. I think he's got more offensive upside. He's a more talented player. He's incredibly skilled. Fogel brings a different approach. You know, he just flies around the ice, and he's a different player. I do think he's a good player. I like him.
Yeah.
I don't know that he's like an upgrade over Arvidsson. I think he's just a little different, and maybe he fits a little bit better stylistically. I guess, but I don't know, like Laferriere, Kopitar, Kempe. Is that scaring anybody's, first line in the NHL and the Western Conference and the Pacific Division? I don't know. Like one thing that we continue to say, and we're gonna say it because Father Time always wins. Kopitar just continues to be consistent. I love him. I don't think there's going to be any reason to say he wouldn't, but he's a year older. And even he has talked about after being asked questions about, is the end of the road is approaching. So, can you have Kopitar play 20 plus minutes a night as your 1C, or will Byfield start to do that? There's a lot of questions. And I think the bull case also takes into consideration like literally the best case scenario for everything, right? Like Laferriere scores 20 goals, or Fogel can replace what Arvidsson can do. Jeannot gets back to pushing 15 to 20 goals. Alex Turcotte and Nikhil Thomas both stay healthy and both are productive. It's a lot of ifs. And it could, but it's just conceivable to say you could run into injury problems on the fourth line. Jeannot could just continue to be, a fourth line guy that's going to end up playing on the third line in this team. Fogel could be a good guy that gets up and down the ice, but production kind of lacks. Laferriere could have another season where it doesn't produce. Kopitar's age catches up. Byfield is the adjustment to center. Like there's questions. There's just a lot of questions. So long-winded way of saying like I can understand the argument that they're better. I don't know that I would make a strong case one way or the other. I don't think I can make one way or the other.
But you could see the arguments one way or
yeah. I buy. I see the logic. I understand it. I'm not sure that I'm all the way there, but I'm also not going to push like that hard against it because, again, I believe in strength down the middle, and they didn't have three good centers last year. Although, as you guys know, I'm a big Blake Lizotte guy, and can Alex Turcotte replace what Blake Lizotte can? I think that's entirely possible, but I think we may also, forget how good Blake Lizotte was at being the role that he played as that fourth line center.
Blake Lizotte, I mean, not to mention a lot of the penalty kill time that he had on this team. I think he was the number one unit right there out there with Trevor Lewis, killing penalties. Was one of the best penalty killing units in the NHL last year until we got to the playoffs. But that's neither here or there. But I guess you just kind of, if you look at like player by player, and I think the one thing that everybody kind of looks at is that top line. You're taking off Quentin Byfield from Kopitar and Kempe, and you're replacing him with Alex Laferriere. Alex Laferriere, high on the player, obviously. I say it all the time. I don't think he's a first-line winger at this moment in his career. So you're going to lose a lot of production there. And like you said, with Kopitar continuing to get up there in age, it's bound to show some regression eventually. I mean, we don't want to see it, but it's eventually going to happen. Who knows what that top line is going to be? But, I mean, you look at that third line, man. I mean, I get so excited about that line and those three playing together because of everything that we've seen from Byfield and Kevin Fiala, just those two and the chemistry that those two have displayed together. Because I remember when they were wingers playing along on the wings of Pierre Dubois, it almost felt like those two had like immediate chemistry, and maybe they were dragging PL along with them a little bit, but that line felt like it was doing pretty well at times. So now you add Quentin Byfield to the middle, and you add a Warren Foegele to the other side, who, like I've told you, I've been a huge Foegele fan ever since going back to Carolina. Like, seeing that number 37 on the ice, it's like, man, like it's just like when you watch Blake Lizotte play, it's like he's always so noticeable because the amount of energy he just displays night in and night out. You're never at a loss for wanting to get more out of Blake Lizotte, and I feel like that's the same thing with Fogle. I mean, Edmonton fans will kind of sometimes disagree, especially since I believe he was a healthy scratch in some playoff games last year for Edmonton, but he did return. But I think those three can develop some really good chemistry. So like when you kind of compare that line of Fiala, Byfield, and Fogle to what we saw a lot of the third line last year with whoever PL was center icing with Alex Ferrier on his wing, it just feels like, man, like we talk. I don't want to bite myself again, but it's like we said it so much last year going into the year, like, man, the Kings finally have some depth down the middle, and they finally have three lines, this top nine that can attack any given instance and be this wave of offense that's coming at you. Maybe I'm just taking crazy pills again, but it feels like it's there again. I can kind of see it again, right?
Yeah, no, I get that. I guess where my only pushback is the top nine is lame. I'm so sick of this.
Yeah.
The best teams have a top line. Let's call it what it is, or a definitive top line, or a top six. Like when the game is on the line or it's late, these are the guys that are going out there. And you could probably, I bet there's I don't know how many different combinations you could put together of who that would be for the Kings, because I don't think they have that. I think it could include Byfield, Fiala, Kempe. You made the statement, I think, a couple months ago, like, just do that.
Yeah.
Can we just get just do that?
We want like a legitimate top line. That's it. Put your three best player on the same line and just let them work magic. It just feels like each of them has like traits that can work off each other, right? You have your playmaker in Fiala, you have your sniper in Kempe, and then you have your all around like up and coming star in Quentin Byfield down the middle. It's like that's there. It's there for you.
And hey, maybe it won't work. You never know if the chemistry doesn't. I get that. That's fine. But man, you're trying to compete in this Pacific Division with some pretty serious firepower. And man, you're trying to sell me on a top nine and depth. And I'm not going to downplay the fact that you do need depth. Like, I'm not suggesting that you don't, but without high-end talent, without a legit top line, I don't know. So let's say that this offense, let's say it is better. I mean, how much better can it be? I think if it's better, it's probably marginal. That said, I think if it's worse, it's probably kind of on the margins too. Like, I think it's all kind of meh, and like, it's fine. I mean, again, and there's going to be stretches where, because of that depth, that they're just always in your face and they're always going to be living in the zone, and they're going to look great at times, but I just don't think there's enough high-end talent here to get them past the first round, which I think, at least is my goal this season, is the Kings have to get out of the first round. And I don't know. I mean, I think the forward group would be, I also, let me say it this way. Like, I also, as much as I think the Kings were missing and are still missing a legitimate scoring winger, the biggest problem with this team is not the forward group. So I don't even think it matters if they're marginally better or marginally worse up front, because I just don't think that is the biggest problem on ice with this team. So I can see the case both ways. I'm indifferent. I'm in the middle here. There's a lot of questions.
Yeah, and I think this is a good thing to point out. Cy says right here, the classic Jim Hiller fire drill where he changes every line after every 5 minutes. And yeah, that was really the case. I mean, Kings fans, you see the lineup cards that the line rushes that Zach Dooley would tweet out before the game and wasn't already even at practices, and everybody would be pulling their hair out saying, like, why is Kevin Fiala with Blake Lizotte and Trevor Lewis? And sure enough, after like the first shift, you'd see him with like someone else, like all entirely. It's like I expect that to take place again. Like, Quentin Byfield isn't going to be just primarily playing third line minutes. I feel like when he's needed on the ice, or when offense is needed, or just a big moment in the game, we're going to see him playing with other players probably higher in the lineup, moving up and down the lineup, like we saw a little bit with Jim Hiller toward the end of last year. Whether that kind of takes a little bit out of Byfield, which maybe that kind of burnt him out a little bit, because I know once Hiller took over, he was just giving him more minutes, like almost 2-3 more minutes a game. Maybe that took a little bit out of Byfield, and then he lost a win toward the end of the year. But even in the playoffs, I thought he was really good. So I'm excited to see this center in Quentin Byfield. And to be honest with you, I'm not really that concerned with this transition that everyone's talking about. Yeah, from wing to center. I don't see it. Like he's shown the capability to play center, even just in small instances last year. We saw the same Quentin Byfield that we saw when he was playing mostly with Kopitar and Kempe. So if he's back to center, I would expect him to still be the same Quentin Byfield that we've seen the last year and a half or so. So I think that's where a lot of my excitement goes, because you just kind of look at the comparison from what we saw with PL Dubois last year to now you have the center and Quentin Byfield. Like, man, like I'm so high on Byfield. I think like the Kings finally have like a legitimate franchise center kind of blossoming right now.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. I guess where I'm at is I don't care that, like, I'm not concerned about improving over Dubois, because Dubois was their third line center. I want an impact top line. So I'm with you that I think I'm bullish on Byfield, and maybe he slowly evolves and gets those minutes. But if you're telling me he's going to get, if he, Kopitar, and Danault are all going to play the same minutes, I don't know. I don't know if that does. And like, yeah, sure, it'll be better on the margins because it'll end up being better than the third line center last year of Dubois, I'm sure. But is that significantly better when there's not like big upgrades on the wings? So yes. I don't know. I'm just kind of, I think the other thing I think about when I think about the forward group is, I think we kind of have figured out, like, okay, we have expectations for Fiala, we have expectations for Kempe. Kopitar is Mr. Consistent. Byfield, I think now we're ready for the next step. Can he approach point a game type of talent, right? Can he get to that 70 to 80 points from a production standpoint? Trevor Moore had his breakout last year. I don't expect him to score 30 again, but I think he can be a 20 low to mid 20s goal scorer more consistently, right?
You like that joke? For those that are listening, I told Joe I think his bold prediction this year is going to be Trevor Moore scoring 30 goals again, because I don't think anybody expects him to do it again.
No. But I look at the new guys, and maybe specifically Tanner Jeannot, who I look at as a fourth line player, brings a style that the Kings, I'll agree, needed, particularly on the fourth line. But pretty much everybody's got him penciled into kind of a middle six spot, which is, boy, that's tough. It's tough to swallow. I don't know. What is a good season from Tanner Jeannot? Like, what is a successful Tanner Jeannot season? And I guess I'll preface this by saying, like, I acknowledge, like, he's going to do a lot of the forecheck and hitting and all that stuff. Like, I'm going to acknowledge that he's going to do that. Like, what I'm asking is, what type of production can he bring that makes it like, okay, this was worth the get? Or are we okay with 15 points and 300 hits? Like, is that successful? Is that good enough? Or what? I don't know. Where are you at with that?
Yeah, I was bringing up his numbers from last year. He played 55 games with Tampa, 7 goals, 7 assists for 14 points, and was a -10. Like, obviously, I don't think that's a good season. I would say he probably would say that's not a good season. We were talking in our group chat. What was it yesterday? I pointed out, and some people were saying, like, we were talking about Jeannot, and I pointed out, like, oh, well, his teammates were mostly Mikey Eisman and Luke Glendening, so he should be better. And then you kind of stabbed me right in the face and said, "Well, there's a reason for that." And I'm like, "Okay, well, yeah, that makes sense." But yeah,
He
I
was
mean, I
coming
don't
off an
know what.
18-point season, so that
Yeah,
is the
I don't know what to expect from Jeannot in terms of like production, but I mean, he's got to be like a solid bottom, like reliable bottom six player that you can put out there and say not have to be worried about, and not have to be like, okay,
Mhm.
now it's getting late in the game. Let's just keep some players on the bench, and Jeannot's one of them, right? Like it gets to the point where you just shorten your bench, and all of a sudden you can't put out a Tanner Jeannot out there anymore. Which, I mean, yeah, if it's late in the game, I'm not expecting him to be like the extra man in terms of like the
Right.
Kings need a goal or anything like that. And I'm not expecting him to be like the same player that we saw that year in Nashville that everybody keeps pointing to. Like, and then he kind of made him that 5 draft pick trade asset that he turned out to be from Nashville to Tampa Bay. I mean, what that was 24 goals, 17 assists for 41 points. So his career high is 41 points, and that was in an 81 game season. If he gets like 35 points, like I think
Oh,
that's huge.
that's a huge win.
Yeah, that's huge, right? Like I don't like, but like I mean, when you have him penciled in alongside Deneau and Moore,
That's what I mean. You
if
kinda
he's
have
like,
to a little
yeah,
bit.
you're playing him in a position you had Victor Arvidsson, who was one of your more productive offensive players when he was healthy. You're probably going to be looking on him to produce. So I don't know if the Kings are expecting a big jump out of him offensively, but by where they're playing him, it certainly feels like they are.
Yeah, like, if you told me Jeannot I mean, again, I didn't like the trade for him. I don't it's not nothing against, like, what he brings as a player. I can buy into that. I just didn't think you need to pay the price for it, but whatever. Like, if he was brought in to play next to Thomas and
Turcotte.
Turcotte on the
Yeah.
4th line, I can get excited about that. Like,
Mhm.
that's okay. I can get excited about that. But instead, it's still Trevor Lewis on the 4th line, and Tanner Jeannot is playing up probably at his like. I mean, he certainly can't play above a 3rd line, and I guess 3rd line if he can find some production again. But what's kind of interesting is like it's not. He shot almost 12% last year.
Not getting me too excited here, Joe.
So I don't know. I don't know.
I
But I
like
guess
what Man of the World said. He put out the lines that he wants to see, and he has that Fiala QB Kempe line up top, which I think
mhm,
you and I agree that would be really fun to watch. Then he has a second line of Fogel, Kopitar, and Laferriere, and then his third line is what I really like here is more with Deneau and Akil Thomas.
mhm.
So we're kind of penciling Tanner Jeannot with Deneau and Moore, but I kind of like this combination of having Akil Thomas play with Deneau and Moore.
Me
I
too.
know it was only like a cup of coffee that he had with the Kings last year, but man, I mean, he was producing, he was scoring goals, and
Who's
I'd have
more
to go
likely
back.
to score? Who's more likely to score 15 to 20 goals and maybe push, in that 30 to 40 point range? Tanner Jeannot or Akil Thomas? I know that might sound crazy because Jeannot has actually done it in the NHL and Thomas hasn't, but
Mhm.
is the upside not with Thomas here?
Yep, exactly. No, I'm with you. I mean, if you're expecting Jeannot to come in and be that same player he was in Nashville, I'm sorry, you haven't watched him play the last few years. He's not. I mean, he can be. Maybe things he could find gold again, but I just don't see that happening. I mean, he's coming into a contract year. A lot of people say that's not a thing. I fully believe it's a thing. I mean, these are players playing for their lives and their
Mhm.
bank accounts almost for the future. So I would
Sure.
expect them to try to produce. But even then, like if you're looking to get some sort of production out of Jeannot, I think you're just looking for too much. So if you play him maybe with like an Alex Turcotte and a Trevor Lewis on the 4th line, have him protect Turcotte because I know Turcotte's gone through a lot of his injuries, like we've seen
Yep.
since he's been drafted. So I mean, he's going to have a full time role with the Kings. You play him with a player like Jeannot, who's not afraid to drop him, who's not afraid to muck it up a little bit, to get down and dirty, and maybe protect a player like Turcotte who might need it from some of these players. So, and hey, maybe you get a little bit of production where you're not necessarily expecting a lot
Yeah.
out of there, out of a 4th line.
It just really underscores the team is one legit winger missing,
Right.
clearly. because
Yeah.
all it does, what does it do? It just knocks everybody down a peg, right? It moves Leferrier down to maybe the third line. It moves Jeannot down to the fourth line. It moves Lewis to 13th forward. Like it just slots everybody where they should be. But
Mhm.
without one winger, without one top six winger, what do you have? Now you have Alex Leferrier playing penciled in, we should say, to a first line role. You've got Warren Fogle, who hasn't spent like a significant amount of time in the top six, I would say. Yeah, he had his moments with Edmonton, but he also spent some time in the depth. He's penciled in as a middle six, and now Tanner Jeannot is penciled in as a middle six, and it's amazing what one more forward could do to the lineup to just sort it out a little bit more, and I think that's my cause for concern is that. But I think they're offsetting it, or the Kings are hoping that they're going to start to see some big jumps from the Turcottes and the Thomases to maybe offset some of that, and Leferrier too. Like,
Yeah.
he was involved last year. Like, I think
80 games. What, 81 games?
yeah, yeah. Like I because again, I always say this too, or not always, but I said it earlier, months ago, where I don't know what Leferrier's expectations were going into camp last year, right? I don't know how much, if he expected to make the team or whatever, but as things fell, he had a good camp and ends up making the team. Well, and then, and again, this is total speculation. I'm not a pro athlete, and I'm not Alex Leferrier. I don't know Alex Leferrier, but now he's established. Like, he's an NHL player. He's got a full season under his belt. And I just wonder if that just changes your mindset as you head into the off season of like, okay, now you know what to expect. You know what to expect from the speed, from the decisions, from all sorts of things. You've been in every building now. Like, you've been around it. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Leferrier take a decent sized jump this year, and just to see get himself a little bit more of a productive player on a more consistent basis in the NHL. I don't know what that looks like. Like, is that top line winger? It feels like a stretch, but I think there's optimism there for him. It's just hopeful that these guys can offset the loss of not acquiring a top end player.
Mhm.
And I understand it. Like, top end players cost, they didn't have a lot of cap. I get that, but I don't know. It's a team that I think lacks some creativity and lacks some goals. I think that's what's still missing.
If we're talking about X factors in this group, I'll ask you yours, but first I want to give mine. I think it's Alex Ferrier for me. I mean, I'm still going to be incredibly optimistic and high on this player from everything I've seen. Every time I watch him play, I just still see a player that can be a legitimate top six winger in the NHL, and he showed that all throughout the rookie faceoff last year, where he scored almost every game he played in. Then he showed that in the preseason when all the A club was down in Australia, he was scoring goals with the B club and all the Reign players in Vegas and the game in Anaheim. So I still see a player there. So I just don't know if he's that legitimate first line winger that the Kings need right now. I don't think he is. But if there's an X factor in this forward group, that has to be mine. Who would be yours right now?
I would, first of all, I would agree with that. Especially if he's playing there, then he kind of has to be. And I guess, I don't know what the definition, the exact definition, or what you would mean by X factor, but honestly, for me, this season hinges on Quinton Byfield.
Okay.
If Quinton Byfield, kind of hits a plateau and does what he did last year, this team is in a world of hurt, because I think they need a lot more from him, and I think they're going to get it. So I think if Byfield continues the ascent up the progression ladder, and he evolves into this, kind of bullies his way into being, when you look at the lineup sheet after the game, the stat sheet after the game, in the box score, and you see, oh, Quinton Byfield led the Kings in ice time today. Oh, Quinton Byfield led the Kings in ice time again. Like, that's what I'm kind of expecting to see, if not right away, after the first month or so of the season, where, yeah, when Dooley puts the line charts out, it'll be Kopitar and then either Byfield or Deneau, and then vice versa for the third line. But push come to shove at the end of it, you'll see the box score and it's going to be Byfield that played 24 minutes or whatever like that. I think
Mhm.
if we start to see that and we start to see a guy that is like becomes that 70 plus point player, impactful player, that I think could elevate the Kings to um, maybe think about being possibly getting out of the first round.
Maybe, possibly, hopefully. We're all on our knees begging and pleading for a series win that we haven't seen in 10 plus years. But
I don't
oh
know. Like,
man,
I don't know if I think does that what do you think about it? Is that fair or
oh
is that it almost feels a little lame to be honest with you, like obviously, but
yeah,
I don't know. I think it's where the Kings are right now. They've made the playoffs 3 years in a row, bounced the first round every single, to the same team. Like there's a level of like, we got to like, pardon me, but shit or get off the pot here. And I
yeah.
feel like so much of that is not in a negative way on Quentin Byfield's shoulders for better, for right or wrong. This is like this is the year now after last year's kind of breakout. Now he's going to presumably slide back to center. Like the time is now for him to kind of take the team over and make it his team, if you will.
No, I love it. Yeah, I think this is a good year for him to kind of take the reins. And I mean, everybody on the Kings and in the organization sees the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of, and it's really Kopitar's tenure that's coming to an end, and they know the future is coming. It's going to be here soon. So, and Quentin Byfield is the future. He's the guy that needs to carry this team to the promised land for this next generation of players that are coming in. And if they're going to take that next step this year, like you said, like it has to be on the shoulders of Quentin Byfield. It's not going to be on the shoulders of Anze Kopitar. It's not going to be on the shoulders of Drew Doughty. It's going to be on these young players that are coming in that are expected to make this impact and be productive in certain areas that the Kings have lacked these last few years. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the reason I totally agree with you. Like Quentin Byfield, probably an X factor. I think the reason I didn't really pick him or didn't think of him is because I expect him to make that
Yeah.
jump. Like I can see it. Like I wouldn't be surprised if like it happens. Like with LaFerriere, and the reason I went that route is
Fair.
like you could go either way. Like if he can make that jump, that's huge. Like that probably takes them to the next level. But if he falls back and is the same player we saw last year, then you probably see a little bit of a
Yeah.
drop off because, like you said, they don't have that legitimate top line winger or the top six winger that they've probably needed these last few years, or
Yeah.
that they had even with Quentin Byfield last year, where they played him at wing a lot. So we'll see. I'm excited to see how this team shakes up. It's weird because there's a lot of turnaround on this roster compared to last year. I mean, you think about the forwards that are not on this team anymore: Blake Lazat, Carl Grunstrom, Anderson Dolan. I mean, all these names that you've been so accustomed to these last few years
Wow.
in the Kings organization, right? I know it's so these heavy hitters, right? But it's like these have been stalwarts in the lineup
Yeah.
almost every night, and now that they're gone, and you have names like Tanner Jeannot, Warren Fogle, finally these young guys in Turcotte, Thomas, LaFerriere. Now he's going to be a second year pro, but still, I mean, it's like it feels like a new wave
I
coming in.
get
And
that.
I think that, yeah,
I'm. It's a new wave, but it doesn't feel like a different wave.
it's
I
because
guess you could.
Kopitar's still the captain. I
Well,
think
no,
that
I no,
you don't think so.
I don't think so because the play like you talked about with Grunstrom's out, Lazat's out, um, but okay, so Jeannot replaces Grunstrom. Turcotte will slide in for hopefully be as good as Lazat was as a 4C. Arvidsson's out. It's Fogle. That's like they haven't replaced these guys with genuine upgrades.
Yeah,
I think that's the part where it's a little like, yeah, it's new, it's fresh, but I don't know. At the same time, it's is it shuffling the deck chairs or is
Robin
it
Peters,
actually
Dave
better?
Paul kind of thing. It's going to be like the same.
Right.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
That's all. I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
it's different, but I don't want to do jumping jacks just for not jumping jacks, cartwheels, whatever people do to celebrate, just because it's different.
yeah, you're
Like
just kind of churning the bottom six a little bit. I mean, you're not really. I see what you're saying.
that's all.
I think it's just new names just to get
Sure.
excited about.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm
And a healthy Thomas and Turcotte, I think, could be impactful. But
mhm.
I also think if people are just penciling in 80 games for these guys, I think that's a little foolish and a little unfair. They haven't done it. And I hope they do. but trying to be realistic, how can you pencil in these guys for 80 games?
Yeah.
I hope that's the case, but what happens if and when there's an injury to one of them?
Yeah, we're probably going to end up watching Jack Studnicka or Glenn Godden and all like so. We'll see. Hopefully, there's no injuries and
Yes.
we can go full 82 game season with the lineup that the Kings have on opening night. That'll happen, sure. All right. Well, Joe, we have another topic I wanted to get to. It doesn't necessarily it doesn't tie to the Kings, but it is in their division. And it seems like it might end up tying to the Kings come April or so, where it has the last 3 years.
Huh.
And that is an extension for one Leon Draisaitl, which came in at what, 8 years? Was it 14 million per year? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Is that what the number was? 8 years at 14 million per year. I'm just going to ask you a simple question: overpay or not?
No.
No, he says. Can you give me an explanation behind that answer?
I mean, I just think this is the market for great players. I mean, was it the year before? I think that Austin Matthews signed, and what did he sign for? 13.75 was it, or something close to that? 13.25. So I don't know, and it's another year. And I think anytime you get to that next year, like I don't know what elite player is up next, but it's always going to be a little bit higher than the one before. Like you look at Pasta got, what did he get? Pasternak, 12 to 13 million in that range.
Yeah, you got a heavy one, huh?
The great players get paid. I think that's fine. I mean, I think people see it's a kind of jarring number. Pasternak got 11.25. But if Pasta were to get paid this year, I bet it's 13 plus. You know, like it's just next year again. McDavid will beat it in 2 years, and he'll get 16 million a year. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think you've made the point a lot of times where you shouldn't necessarily look at the number. You should look at the percentage of the cap hit, which I think is accurate. I think by all accounts, the cap's going to go up over the next few years. But especially in Edmonton's case, we like going back to Byfield for a second. So we wanted like an 8-year deal for Byfield, but we knew that LA to do that would probably have to get to that like 8, maybe even $9 million range, because why you want to entice Byfield to do that? It's a little bit of a different situation with Draisaitl, but they got him for 8 years. So you're going to pay a little bit extra, I guess, to make sure he locks in for those couple extra. So I don't have a problem with the number. I think this is a team that clearly is looking to win a Stanley Cup. You don't win a Stanley Cup by trading Leon Draisaitl. I don't know what you could possibly get back that makes your team better, that makes your team more likely to win a Stanley Cup. So I think for the Oilers, it was a no-brainer. And it could work out. So the funny thing is when these big deals, like Pasta signed his deal and it was a big number at the time, but looking now, it's like 11.25 is not bad. Right. So it's like, again, I don't have a problem with it at all.
Yeah.
It's great for Edmonton.
I totally agree with you. I mean, when you have one of the best players in the world, you do whatever it takes to re-sign that player. You don't let that player walk away. I'm sorry. Like, what are you going to do to replace a top 5 player? Get another top 5 player to come on your team? You're going to get 3 players that maybe can put up the same production of a Leon Draisaitl? No. Like, I've seen with my own eyes at crypto.com the things Leon Draisaitl can do come playoff time. And I have to tell you, Joe, I hate it. I hate it with every inch of my being. It's terrible because, man, he's just such an amazing, incredible player. And yeah, sure, maybe he gets a little bit more production because of the minutes he gets with McDavid. But I have to tell you, like, there's a reason this guy won MVP one year. There's a reason. He didn't just win MVP because he plays with McDavid. He won MVP because he's one of the best players in the world. And yeah, if you have to give him the most expensive contract in NHL history, you do it. And even then, like, I probably even would have paid him $15 million, to be honest with you. It's just, he's that good of a player. And he probably would have got that on the open market if he did test free agency. So I mean, if I'm Edmonton, I feel like they did really well here. I mean, you're going to have a lot of your cap tied up in two players. I get that. It's going to be tough to build a roster. But we've seen from Edmonton the last few years, when it gets down to the nitty gritty in these games, they put out 5 players every other shift. You want to talk about depth? Edmonton does not have the word depth in their dictionary when it comes down to like the last 2-3 minutes of an important game. They're going to put out McDavid. They're going to put out Draisaitl. They still have Zach Hyman and Evan Bouchard, who does need a new contract. So we'll see what happens there. But man, like, yeah, if you're able to take up two of the 5 skaters on the ice with McDavid and Draisaitl, I think you have a legitimate chance to win a Stanley Cup every year. And I hate to say that as a Kings fan. It's going to be tough to beat this team. We're probably going to be sitting here come next April in 2025 talking about game 1 between the Oilers and the Kings again. And I'm going to just hate it again. But yeah, if you're Edmonton and you're an Edmonton Oilers fan, you just have to be jumping for joy thinking about you have another full 8 years of Leon Draisaitl playing along, which I would expect McDavid to re-sign and stay in Edmonton, or I mean, he probably is staying already for a long time. But yeah, now you have a long-term where you don't have to worry about maybe Leon Draisaitl leaving when he hits free agency. I mean, I think that's huge for that team to where they want to take them where they want to go, and that is obviously to win a Stanley Cup after they came so close last year.
Yeah, and I don't. I mean, so much is made about that I've seen about the number, and I just don't care about the 14 million. I mean, where I always struggle, and I've said this before a lot of times, is I don't like term on almost any deal. Unless you're paying, your stars or your top young players. Like, I got no problem giving Byfield an 8-year deal. Mm-hmm. Obviously, 8 years for Draisaitl, who's a little bit older. I don't know how that ages, but you're also, if you're Edmonton, I don't know how much you care about that necessarily, just because I think for the next 4 years, he's still going to be one of the best players in the league. And even then a couple of years after that, he's still going to be pretty good. So will he be a $14 million player? No, but you're hoping that for the next like 3 to 4, maybe 5 years that he's, a $15 to $20 million player. And so which I think could be the case. And I think that their eggs are all in the cup basket right now, and they're going to do whatever they think is necessary to win a Stanley Cup right away. So I don't think this is one of those situations where I don't think the team context and where they are, I don't think they care about years, 6, 7, 8 of this deal. Because I think their focus is we're winning a cup before that.
Yeah. Do you think this deal gets more, I don't want to say criticism, but I mean, it certainly seems like there's criticism out there for whatever reason. But do you think this deal gets any sort of criticism if Darnell Nurse wasn't on their salary cap? Because I feel like everybody kind of groups together those high-end deals and says, well, now
I think there'd still be some criticism, because there's definitely still people that are of the belief that you can't win with high cost players, and it has to be a team full of
that can't be a thing anymore. That we got whatever the whole double digit whatever thing. That's
but I mean, I think it's a fair point, because I mean that's the stuff that hurts you. The stuff that doesn't hurt you isn't paying Leon Draisaitl $14 million or paying Connor McDavid $14 million. What hurts you is paying guys that shouldn't be getting what they make, like Leon or like Darnell Nurse is getting double what he should, and that is a killer. Now, Bowman did an excellent job getting out of Cody Ceci, so that is huge.
Yeah, thanks Sharks, by the way, you loser.
Yeah, that's huge. But man, the nurse thing, and I've always said, I think Nurse is a better player than he gets credit for, just because his contract is so obscene that he's no way he can play to that. He's a fine 4 or 5 defenseman, I think, but he's getting paid like a top pair. And so that is what hurts him. And yeah, I mean, if I'm Edmonton, shoot, if there's a way to find a way to get out of that contract, that would be even better. But I don't know. I see your point. I think that's fair. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it would make the hit on the cap a lot less of a sting if you didn't have, if Nurse was making 4.5 as opposed to what he's making. But I think there'd still be people that give grief just because I feel like whenever there's these big signings, it's everybody talks about how, well, look at the guy, and it's like I get it. Like Crosby was on a discount. Look at those
Yeah.
Bruins. I mean, the Bruins, they won one cup. Remember, they were a great team for years, and kind of still are. But the Bergeron didn't make a lot of money, relatively speaking. McKinnon in Colorado was underpaid for a while, but you know what? So Draisaitl was very underpaid for a while too, before his recent deal. So, I think it's it's a bigger issue if you're overpaying for guys that are the depth parts of your lineup, overpaying guys that are, you know, fourth, fifth, or fifth, sixth defensemen, bottom six players. I mean, those are the guys that you shouldn't be paying too much money to, and I think that's what gets you into trouble. Is that more so than paying your high guys?
We don't have to worry about overpaying bottom pair defensemen in LA, do we?
No, Kings have no issues
problems
with
there,
that.
right? No, okay.
No, they would never. They
Just
have a
want
Hall of Fame general manager as a defenseman, so there's no way
to...
he would make a move like that.
Oh man, for all the listeners that are still around after Joe said that Brent Clark might not make the roster because of Kyle Burrows, I appreciate you sticking around with us. But oh yeah, I'm excited though. Hockey's back next week, man.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
it's been a long summer. It's still hot, dude. Like it was like almost 100 degrees here in LA today. It was insane. Like
We got that chill in the morning. These now, not frost
you can
chill,
kind of feel it, like the
but
winter chill.
fall is here
Okay.
officially. Like today was first day of school for my older son, and so like fall is here. So it's definitely that crisp air. I mean, it warmed. We're still at the time where like it'll warm up throughout the day, so it'll be a real nice day. But those mornings, they're a little chilly right now. So,
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I opened my closet there and I saw all the jackets that I usually take off to the rink. I'm like, man, I can't wait to get those on. Being in cold environment watching hockey, and then when it gets down to December, January, be complaining about how cold it is in the rink again. So, but Joe, it's been fun. I'm excited to talk hockey with you. I'm looking forward to next week. Maybe we'll do another episode next week before the games start. But yeah, if you're excited to watch hockey, I believe the Kings play on Friday. They play against Saturday, and then they finish up the 3-game set and the rookie face-off with a game against the Ducks on Monday, which I'm really excited about because I know Anaheim's got a pretty solid contingent of young talent heading over there. So that'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, so I think we'll go ahead and end it here. I appreciate everybody in the chat. I appreciate everybody tuned in, everybody that will be listening on the pod. We'll go ahead and upload this right after this. We end it here. But go ahead and have a good night, everybody. And on this podcast, like always, go Kings, go.